Booting up Neyyah for the very first time throws you straight into its world, with no introductions and no hand-holding. You wake up in an unfamiliar place with absolutely no clue why you're there. The only welcome is a cryptic message telling you that your arrival was foretold, and that you might just be the world's salvation. As you start exploring, you'll come across scraps of notes, fragments of conversations and characters who all share one thing in common: the complete inability to explain anything clearly. That's because Neyyah uses a very old-school approach to storytelling where you, the player, have to piece together the narrative like a puzzle. During the first few hours when you're wandering around with no clear direction, this can feel pretty frustrating, but if you stick with it, you'll eventually start connecting the dots and uncovering the story behind this strange world. Unfortunately, the writing itself is one of the game's weaker aspects. The characters aren't particularly memorable, and the narrative doesn't explore any striking themes. In the end, it feels more like a framework built to support the gameplay, rather than a truly compelling story. Neyyah is a first-person adventure almost entirely built around puzzles, an undeniable love letter to the Myst series, especially Riven. And honestly, the feelings it stirs up while playing are almost identical. Curiosity when you first start exploring, disorientation when you come across strange places and mechanisms you can't even begin to understand, frustration when you're wandering around in circles looking for the tiniest clue, even a bit of anger. And then, finally, that amazing satisfaction when everything clicks into place, only to go right back to square one and start the cycle all over again. The puzzles themselves come in different forms, mostly logic-based, and they really do justice to the inspiration behind them. They start off fairly gentle but quickly ramp up in complexity, demanding intuition, creativity, and a sharp logical mind to solve. One of the most useful tools for tackling these puzzles is the in-game journal, which automatically records every point of interest you come across, complete with screenshots. That way, you don't have to constantly backtrack if you forget to jot something down on paper. That said, I'd still recommend keeping a real notebook handy, because the in-game journal can get pretty cluttered and awkward to use after a while. The maps are also really helpful, even though, sadly, they can't be used for fast travel. Still, the journal is completely optional, so if you're looking for a pure old-school experience, you can ignore it entirely. You can even reduce or completely disable the hint messages that pop up whenever you discover new clues or unlock interactions. As for length, that's always tricky with this kind of old-school puzzle adventure, since it depends a lot on the player. But if I had to give an estimate, I'd say you're looking at somewhere between 10 and 15 hours of playtime. Visually, Neyyah wears its inspirations on its sleeve. The graphics are pre-rendered just like in the classic adventures it clearly takes after. Sure, there aren't many animations, but the environments are atmospheric, richly detailed, and often quite evocative. The characters, on the other hand, are played by real actors. Now, their costumes definitely give off a bit of a handmade, low-budget vibe, but honestly, I think that's intentional. It fits the kind of old-school experience the game is aiming to recreate. As I mentioned earlier, the game is played entirely in first person, and movement is handled in a very traditional way. There are no walking animations as you travel from point A to point B, just hard cuts, quick transitions. It might sound a little jarring at first, but you can adjust the speed of those transitions in the settings, which makes it much smoother. The soundtrack is excellent, filled with evocative, high-quality tracks that blend seamlessly with the game's atmosphere. As for the voice work, or rather the acting, since the characters are played by real actors, it can be a bit uneven. At times it does feel somewhat amateurish, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't really see that as a flaw. It feels more like a deliberate choice, part of the overall package, and it adds to the charm of the experience. Neyyah is an adventure clearly aimed at a very specific niche, fans of classic Myst-style games. For that audience, it's a well-crafted and thoroughly enjoyable experience, despite a story that isn't particularly memorable. For others, though, it might feel a bit too challenging and demanding,